Hey everybody, welcome back to Record-ology and welcome into live. I love doing lives. They're awesome. If you're watching the replay and you're like, dang it, I missed this again. I apologize if the time zone is just not conducive to, your schedule. I get that, but the replay is here for that reason. So I hope that you can join us live. If you don't know how to make that happen, just a thumbs up. Or do a thumbs up, but just make sure you're subscribed, obviously, and make sure that you have selected all notifications, hit the bell and all that good stuff, and then you'll get that notification. And make sure you've got notifications turned on your device so you don't miss that. And I know even if you do all those things, sometimes YouTube is a little wonky, and I get all of the time I get messages from people saying, man, I just don't even get notices of when your videos are up anymore, even though I've got all the notifications. YouTube does its own thing from time to time. So welcome into my friends. Segatari, welcome in. Old Radios. UTP26T, Jeremy Hobbs in the house as a mod. Thank you so much for being here. Anthony, I am up to your notification. I'm glad you got them turned on, man. I'm glad they're working for you. Steven, welcome in. Or Stefan, welcome in. Welcome in, everybody. Hit the thumbs up on the way in the door. He's so close to affording the Bolex. Is it super expensive? I forget. You probably told me this, but I don't remember if it was super expensive or what. But that's awesome, dude. How many cameras do you have in your collection? How many are you up to? You saw the notification, UTP. I'm glad you did, man. I don't have any agenda for tonight. I got a little bit of news for you, and it's gonna. Well, okay, I do have an agenda. So I have some news that I'm going to share with you guys before anybody else. And again, I always say that folks that make time to join the live or watch the replay are on the inner circle. I feel like you guys are, for the most part, like the same people that were a part of our Vinyl Nation. You really want to be engaged as an audience, and you want to know, you don't just want to skim through shows and take it at a super high level. You're kind of interested in that relationship, that give and take. And I'm really grateful for that, because I want our channel to be as integrated and as interactive as possible. And to me, a big part of that is simply, engagement. So anything we can do to make that happen. So being that you guys are on the inner circle, I have got some news to share. Now, back to what I was saying, I don't really have an agenda for the rest of the show. I just wanted you guys and I to chat about whatever you wanted to chat about. So that will be our show for today. Again, we're doing Vlogmas. We have done a show, a post, or something every single day during the entire month of October, calling it our Vlogtober, to drive engagement and just spend more time together. I think it's fun. It's a blast. It's challenging. Because the audience, you guys, the things you like the most are the things that are the most difficult to produce. Like the videos we did yesterday, the record player review. It's hard to get your hands on a record player every day, right? So, but anyway, it's just a blast to do. So, Wesley says, I got an Audio-Technica LP60 XPT. It's awesome. Those are awesome. That is a great turntable. And fully automatic. I still can't wrap my brain around how the #1 most recommended entry-level turntable is also fully automatic. And it's bizarre. Like, they didn't have to make that a fully automatic, but it is. And I think people that start out don't realize what a blessing that really is, because you go through hundreds and hundreds of dollars of manual turntables before you get to the automatic. So to have the entry-level recommended unit automatic, that's amazing. Old Radio says, hot take, Flickr is better than Insta for photography. Okay, thanks for the tip. Segatari says, do you collect reel-to-reel? If so, would you say a reel-to-reel tape wears faster than a vinyl record or slower? I do, absolutely. I've got down here, kind of at knee height on this lower shelf here, I've got my wonderful Akai GX4000D. I think this one is. This is the early 80s model with the glass ferrite heads, and it's a phenomenal piece of audio equipment. Any day of the week, a tape is going to sound better than a record, in my opinion, because you've got a couple things going. You've got complete channel isolation. The left channel and the right channel are completely separate, whereas a record, the stereo signal, the left and right, are all coming out of one groove. So on the the lower frequencies, there's less channel separation. So the bass frequencies tend to be kind of in the middle, whereas the higher end frequencies kind of widen out that stereo image, but you don't get complete isolation. There's a percentage, somewhere around 40%. There's a percentage. So tape is amazing, and I've got a bunch of tape. One of my prized possession tapes, he's like, oh, here he goes again, is this. And Patsy Cline reel-to-reel tapes are usually very expensive. I did snag this at a pretty dang good deal, dang good price, and 7.5 inches per second, which was like the consumer standard for high quality. It is a gorgeous tape. I love this thing. And yeah, they sound fantastic. But to answer your question about wear, as in wearing out, that's hard to answer. I mean, these tapes get brittle over time. The leaders snap off. Thankfully, they're recorded with a lot of blank tape at the beginning because you end up splicing and adding new leaders like I did to that tape. So it definitely is a toss-up. I don't know. Then again, on a record doesn't really dry up and become brittle. But which one wears? That's a good question. That is a great question. I love reel-to-reel though. UTP 216, your video with a review of the powered speaker and turntable is great. Thank you. I appreciate it. That one was a lot of work to produce. And it was weird because I started losing light early in the day. I'm like, why is it so dark? I know it's getting dark here now at like 4:30, 5 o'clock here in Colorado. But it was like, I don't know what time of the day. It was earlier than that when I started. And it just started getting dark. I'm like, what is going on? It was like 3:30, I think. And I realized there was a big storm system moving over. So it got brighter throughout the show. I always prefer to use daylight. It's much better than any artificial light when it comes to doing this, especially with the equipment I have. So if I can get that daylight coming in, it always looks better, in my opinion. But it is nice to have the ring light so I can physically do shows after I've lost sunlight. And now that, winter is beginning to rear its head, it's going to be, it's going to be harder to capture that daylight because I work full time. So finding extra time can be a little tricky, but I'm glad you liked it. Have I ever owned a MoFi pressing? I have not, Anthony. I have not. I believe there was some drama over the last couple of months regarding, was it MoFi? There was this thing where the analog masters might have been digital or something like that. Old radios. I put up some videos of 1901 or 1902 records in my collection. That's cool. I got to check that out, man. It's been a while since I've had a chance to check out your channel. Anthony, what is your most expensive you've ever owned? Not sure if you're talking about records or record players. The most expensive turntable that I've ever owned was the Audio-Technica LP7, which was $800. Still sells for $800. I ended up selling it. And yeah, I've done a few in the $500 range. The Crosley C10 made by Project was $500. There was the Victrola thing that really didn't, merit $500 price tag, in my opinion. Since come down in price. But there's been a few in that $500 range. Now, I'm not trying to, the channel was designed for entry level. So yesterday's show on that unit from Electron was our bread and butter. That is the stuff that we cut our teeth on here. This is exactly what Record-ology is about. Entry level, getting new people into vinyl record collecting. It's not about getting the biggest and best that we can. So I haven't been approached or had the ability to review anything higher than $800. So that may be it, and that's fine. But if somebody came to me and said, hey, I'd like to review this you know, Technics 1200 deck, the latest and greatest. Sure. I'm not going to say no to that. But really, we're real because we were always designed, the channel was always designed for the entry level and dispelling myths and things like that. I never, ever, ever thought when I started this channel that anybody would want me to review a record player or that I would have the opportunity to do that. And then as I moved into these videos and into the channel, I learned because I grew up with record players as a kid, but I'm not a record player expert. I never purport to be one. It was always, I'm the enthusiast. I'm here to learn right alongside you guys and for you guys to teach me. So again, it's kind of a backwards approach to doing this. Usually YouTube channels like, I'll tell you about everything, but that's not the way it is. I'm here to let you guys live vicariously through me as I unbox things. Let's experience it together. I'm here to talk about observations and things that I have learned, and I'm here to learn from you. So it's different than, you know, other channels, so many of them that are just trying to, you know, get a hold of the best and the greatest. Record, most valuable record. That's subjective too. I'm not 100% sure. The most I've paid for a record was just under 100 for a rare pressing of Patsy Cline's debut album, 1957. DSLR and film photography, that's awesome. DAT, yeah, I haven't. The only exposure I have to DAT was back in my broadcast television days. We use DAT sometimes. UTP says tape is too digital for me. Leo says, good morning from here in the UK. Early morning. Isn't it like 3 a.m., you guys? Thank you, Leo, for joining. Should you be in bed? Maybe you work a night shift. I'm glad you are here, though. Thank you so much, my friend. DCC. Anthony says, would you prefer reel-to-reel audio or lossless Apple Music? That's a good question. I love Apple lossless because of the portability and the quality. But the sound of an analog tape deck, good speakers, and dedicated time to listen to it is definitely a warmer, richer, more dynamic experience. Even though, and I when I started this channel, again, if I learned something, changed my mind, or discover I was wrong about something, I'm going to be the first one to admit it. I'm not here to prove anything to anybody. I'm just not. But one of the things that I used to say all the time on the channel is that I didn't buy into the whole vinyl is warmer thing. Digital sounds cold and cool. And I, did that show, which is slightly infamous, gets a lot of comments still. It's one of our top performing videos to this day, where I said that vinyl was inferior to CDs, which on a technical level it is, and that was my point. I think my opinions have evolved around that, and I do perceive the warmth of analog beyond the technicality of how that's achieved, which I know is through harmonic distortions and things of that nature. But anyway, at the end of the day, it does sound warmer. So if I listen to Apple Music or any digital source, like I was just listening to a CD a minute ago, I was listening to some Peggy Lee compact disc, which is an uncompressed PCM, not as high resolution as Apple lossless, but still a lossless format, 16-bit, and it doesn't sound quite as warm and vibrant. If for my people that are into photography, it's kind of like this. Here's an analogy, and I'm just thinking about this on the fly. Tell me if this makes sense to you guys. If we were to take the comparison of CDs versus analog, or digital, let's just say digital versus analog sound, and put them side by side. Let's create an analogy of photography. Let's say, let's take two photographs. Let's take a photograph that's left untouched and a photograph that has perhaps some alterations made to it. And the alterations perhaps alter the integrity. Let's say they're both, just for example, 16 megapixel photographs and the same image, same picture, One is just the raw file from the camera, but the other one, perhaps the chrominance or luminance is boosted, the contrast, maybe it's just a little bit, the colors are ramped up, it's a little, the vibrance is turned up a little bit. And to me, that's the analog sound. Like it has the same amount of pixels, perhaps it's got the same photograph, but it has some enhancements that are enjoyable. The colors look more vibrant. Then if you've ever edited a photo and you've made all these changes and you go back to the original, oh, that looks terrible in comparison. It's the kind of the coldness of digital sound versus analog sound. I don't know if any of that made sense, but I do believe that to my ears, the warmth of a reel-to-reel would be desirable from a sound perspective only. Now, if you're talking about everything like portability and access and whatnot, Apple Music wins because it can get a hold of so many more songs and albums than the I don't know, maybe 10, 20, 30 reel-to-reel tapes I have. Gary, good evening and morning. Another friend of mine in the UK that's up in the middle of the night. There's like a wave of insomnia passing over my friends in the UK. Gary, welcome in. For those of you that have joined since I mentioned it, stay tuned because I have a little bit of news to share of something coming up in the near future that you are going to want to know, I would hope. I wish reel-to-reel tapes would go down in price, says Secretary. Me too, man. They're so expensive. That Patsy Cline tape can go for hundreds. And I've snagged it for like 35, which is a lot of money for any singular piece of music these days, but it was the only way to get, one of those. And it's cool to have, but man, it's expensive. Records are always cheaper. And even back when the audio market consisted of tapes, and I'm talking reel-to-reel tapes and vinyl records as the primary two ways to buy commercial music. The audiophile, the high end, the rich people, would go for tapes. They were always more expensive, whereas a vinyl record was always cheaper. And that definitely holds true today. That album on vinyl, $14 album, sometimes less. At a record show, $3, $4. But the tape, $40 and up to hundreds. So it's just the way it is. They're made in a lot less quantities. And then you've got to think about the fact too that a record is an inanimate object, whereas a tape, somebody's fiddling with it. There's environmental concerns that can impact the tape itself, all that stuff. Jason says, my wife's visa was approved today, so thank you for your prayers and your support. Oh, dude, that is such good news. By the way, long time no talk. You need to write to me more often, man. That is great. Oh, I'm so thankful. Oh, praise God for that. That is awesome. That is awesome. You'll have to tell me more about it. That's so great. I know that's been a struggle for you, man. Old radios, lossless, I guess. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in and out of these little mini side conversations, which I appreciate you guys doing. If I don't know, if I'm not answering right, just smack me upside the head. Say the comment again. UTB216. So reel-to-reel tape, does it have a speed control like record players? It's a great question. Yes. So reel-to-reel tape is usually one of three primary speeds. If you have a deck, like a regular consumer deck like this, or the Focus, hello, there are three typical speeds, sometimes two. The slowest is 1 7/8 inches per second. That's going to be the lowest quality. With analog, more is always better. So the faster, more tape that's moving across the head means a higher resolution, better sound quality. The trade-off is you need more tape, so you get less record time if you're using it more, and it's a faster tape. So 1 7/8 is like voice quality only, dictation, stuff like that. Music is going to sound muffled, not good quality. And you may be saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, isn't a compact cassette 1 7/8 inches per second? It is, but it's designed and formulated for high fidelity at that speed. Different kind of formulation. The tapes on reel-to-reel are thicker because they're designed to be handled by fingers, and it's just different. It's a different game. So the next speed up is 3 3/4 inches per second, which will give you kind of an intermediary that you could arguably achieve high fidelity with 3 3/4 inches per second. It's not going to be the highest, but if you want to record a long album, or a long piece of music or a lot of content of whatever it is, then that would be acceptable. Think of it as acceptable. And again, the biggest thing is you can fit more onto same piece of tape. So it's moving faster than 1 7/8, but not as fast as the highest. And then you may be saying to yourself, wait a minute, isn't 3 3/4 inches per second the same as 8-track, which is high fidelity? It is. But again, it's a different, and it's even ½ inch, like or quarter-inch, like 8-track. But it's a different thing. And then the top speed for consumer decks is 7.5 inches per second. So when you buy an album like this, somewhere on there, it's going to say 7.5 inches per second. Let me see if I can spot it. Yep. So look down here, 7.5 inches per second. So this is going to be the highest quality available commercially. And an album recorded at 7.5 inches per second is going to look like that. Notice how the hub is larger. You have to keep an eye out because sometimes tapes were sold, albums were sold like value editions that were 3 3/4 inches per second. So when you're buying tapes, if the price seems strangely cheap, make sure it's not a 3 3/4 inches per second. And if it is, just know that the fidelity will be a tiny bit less. It'll be a tiny bit less. Another thing that you want to keep in mind is the track layout. 4-track is the most common, and that's basically the stereo tracks are interlaced like this, 4-track. And unlike a cassette tape, like a compact cassette where they're like this. If you get the wrong combination, if you have a 4-track tape on a non-4-track machine, then the tracks won't line up properly and there'll be signal bleed and stuff. That's happened to me a few times. I've got some tapes that aren't 4-track, they're stacked, and you can get issues with that. I'm trying to get to my, since you guys are asking about the reel-to-reel, I'd like to be able to talk about it. Okay, don't dump this. Don't dump this. Okay, hold on. I'm trying to do this so I can get tapes. Here's some custom tapes made by my friend Fardamark. He makes reel-to-reel tapes, even with the labels and stuff, which is fun. I bought a tape deck recent. Oh no, not tape. It wasn't a tape deck I bought. I just happened to buy. It was when I bought that Gerard. Yeah. It was when I bought that Akai. Was it an Akai? Yeah, it was an Akai. The older one that had the built-in 8-track. It came with a whole stack of blanks, which is cool. Here's another tape. This is actually my first reel-to-reel tape. And so yeah, to answer your question, there it is again, 7.5 inches per second, 4-track. There are different speeds. Now, if you think back to professional reel-to-reel decks, NAB decks and things that are used in the studio, they would record artists at 15 inches per second or even 30 inches per second. And this whole rabbit trail is a fascinating rabbit trail to go down. The story of how magnetic tape became the primary source of recording audio in the United States and elsewhere over, just cutting a disc in wax is fascinating. After World War II, the Allies basically stole the technology, or not stole, they appropriated the technology and that had been used by the Germans and specifically the Nazi regime. If you want to go down the rabbit trail further, look up magnetophone recorders, which were the very first reel-to-reel machines. They recorded on paper tape, a lot of the times at 15 and 30 inches per second. Surprising fidelity, paper tape. So this technology gets taken back to the United States and elsewhere and is financed privately via corporations such as Ampex and private investments from Bing Crosby, of all people, and to facilitate and develop this technology. And then that's why, from the 50s through, I would say through the 90s even, a lot of most studio recordings are made on tape, and we enjoy the fidelity of it. People think about vinyl records like, oh, vinyl records, did they record it that way? It was recorded on record? No, the record is a secondary media that is pressed and copied from tape sources. And those tape sources are what sits in the vault. Those are the things that are the precious copies. And those are the things that burned to a crisp in situations like the 2008 Universal fire. So, all right, tangent. I apologize. I can't help myself, man. You tee me up with a question like that. Check out our channel for real stuff. We've done a lot. We've talked about. We demonstrated all that stuff. Haunted Coachman, cool name. Welcome back, by the way. I know you've been here before. I haven't played a tape since Sony Walkmans were new and okay prices. I never thought I would go back to tapes after I felt like I clawed my way out of cassette tapes into the CD world and beyond. And I personally never thought I'd go back, and I have tapes now again somehow. I like it. It's very strange. The one Akai I have can do 15 inches per second with special capstan sleeve. Yes. So that one that we reviewed last, that Akai that we reviewed, that giant boat anchor one, huge one, have the same thing. In fact, I think when we reviewed it, it was in 15 IPS mode. But you couldn't buy, there was no commercial albums released in 15 IPS that I know of. I think the fastest, highest quality tapes for commercial album releases were 7.5. But the motor run cap slows everything up. Oh, it makes sense. Jody says, a second of 2 subways in my town recently got shut down when the store manager was arrested. Random? I'm sad to hear that happen. That's not good. Most expensive one for old radios is a Victor II gramophone. Paid $1,200. Old radios, have you checked out? You've checked out our Kurt Knock videos by now, haven't you? I'm sure I've already asked you that. Anthony says, what's the most expensive cartridge you've ever owned? I'm not going to go on my tangent on cartridges, but it's this guy right here, the Grado Gold Prestige 2, about $260. Again, considering I'm on an entry-level channel, this is high-end. Sounds good and warm, too. All right, I'm biting my tongue. I'm not going to go down my tangent on cartridges. What cartridge do you recommend for playing vintage vinyl? For vinyl with a micro groove, like a, not a 78, it depends on the sound profile you want. If you want a warm tonality, Grado Black is a fantastic cartridge. Or the, gosh, I can never remember it. Gosh, it's the one I'm running right now on the Technics. Shoot, what is this thing? Sumiko Black Pearl. Has very warm tonality too. It's like $90 or so. Similar to the black, Grado Black. If you like neutral tonality, Audio Technica. I love the economy one. I've got it on C200 right now. What is it? Dang it. Okay, I'm just going to show you. I always do this. And you guys always remind me what it is. I don't know why I can never remember Audio Technica cartridge makes and models, but this guy right here. Something VMN 95E. I want to say 95, something 95E. It's the one with that slanted front. This thing sounds fantastic, and it's like a $35 cartridge. You can't go wrong with that. If you want a colder tonality, if you want one that's perhaps more accurate or more, whereas Grado is, emphasis on the low end, the warmer tonality, cooler tonality preference, I would go with Ortofon. BJ says, I apologize for the weird question, but it's not a weird question at all. What's the difference between an LP60 versus an LP3? So the X series indicates the newer version. So like everything Audio Technica now has the X that previously didn't. So the LP60s have the X, the LP120s have the X, and the LP3, I guess, I wasn't aware of that, has the X as well. That new model that has the Bluetooth, which I can't get my hands on. I still have my old first gen LP3, and I love it. But the basics is the LP3 is a bigger turntable, and unlike the LP60, it has a removable head shell. So the whole head shell comes off. I've got In fact, this is the original one off my LP3. So the whole head shell assembly comes off. It's a straight tone arm, so it's got an angled head shell. So you can, change out the cartridge. You can put any cartridge on there you want. Whereas the LP60 has that permanently affixed cartridge, which is the entry-level Audio-Technica 3600 cartridge. It's a great cartridge, but you can never upgrade from it. You can put on new styli. You can even put on a styli for whatever type you want, as long as it's compatible with that body. But you can't replace the cartridge itself. So that's one thing. You can also set the counterbalance. That's a feature that you can't do on the other one. It's bigger. It's got a different design and style. It's more expensive, but that's really it. That's really it. It also supports moving coil cartridges, so you could load it up with a moving coil cart. Sadly, very, very sadly, I cracked the dust cover on mine. I dropped something on it in storage. Terrible, which is a bummer. I love that turntable. It could be made perfect in my eyes if it played 78s and it had speed control. It's got like a servo, not a servo control. Yeah, it's like a DCC servo control, motor speed regulator thing, like the Technics actually. Doesn't have quartz lock, and it doesn't have an adjustable pitch. So in order to calibrate the speed, you have to get underneath with a jeweler screwdriver, which is annoying. But if you're just starting out, just go LP60. Use LP60s at one time. LP60s, you could get them for killer prices, like $90. You could get $89 and get the bare bones LP60. Now they're like $200 after the logistics things that we've been going through for the last couple of years. Old Radio says, I'm still fine with my LP120 as my main turntable, and a great turntable that is. Don't underestimate how good the LP120s are. I don't know if you've got the X. By the way, what happened different with the X for the LP120? The original people said there was motor noise and like platter rumble because it is direct drive. But the other thing was that the preamp was adding noise. And when I talked to Audio-Technica about it, they admitted that was the guy I talked. Okay, the guy I talked to wasn't Audio-Technica. He was a third-party guy, but he told me that he believed it to be true, and I was surprised. Like, really? I thought it was just some BS thing that people were saying, but no. So the LP120 X series, when you switch off the preamp, it truly bypasses it. Because people were removing their preamps, their built-in preamps on those things, because I guess they were adding noise. I sold my LP120X USB, and I regret that decision. I actually regret that decision. That would be sitting here right now if I hadn't done that. The C200 is nice. It's not the same thing as an LP120. It's made by the same company, but it's not the same turntable. It doesn't have the third speed, and it doesn't have quartz lock, although this thing is rock steady on speed, so that's actually not a big problem. But the biggest thing is that third speed. It also feels lighter and plasticier because it doesn't have the weight. The LP120s are weighted. Already was in a turntable until I was 12, and what did kids who grew up in the 90s, early 2000s associate with vinyl? Scratching like a DJ, exactly. Gary says 318 there. Well, now it's got to be about 339, I would guess. Am I that far behind on comments? I'm sorry, you guys. Anthony says, would you rather listen to your Audio-Technica LP7 rather than lossless Apple Music? Yes. If I had time to do it, yes. And I don't have that anymore. I sold it. I sold it to somebody that has really appreciated it. True, but people have their preferences. I'm sure new iPhone camera is better than 16mm Bolex, but it's not the same. Exactly. UTB 216, more like the same photo taken with a digital camera and a 35mm camera. Yep, that's a good analogy. Sorry, I was thinking on the fly, which isn't my specialty. New sub here, Metal Hails from Quebec, Canada. I have a 1950s Wilcox record lathe, which is awesome to have any kind of lathe, with an obviously powdered crystal in the cutting head. What are my options for replacing it? There are people out there who sell somehow new old stock on stuff. There are people who rebuild things like that. My counterpart on here on YouTube, Fardamark, had a record lathe, had rebuilt recently. So Unfortunately, that's not my realm of expertise. I'm not sure who. I would personally, if I was in your shoes, start out with a Google search, and if I knew better than that, I would tell you. But that's as far as I know. However, that's awesome, and I want you to keep me updated because that's awesome. Honey Coachman says digital camera with 45 SLR is way better than a mobile phone camera. Anthony says, are these gold ring cartridges slightly cheaper than the Grados, a better quality of bass? Let's check that out. I've heard of them. The Buddy Holly record I own is worth hundreds. That's awesome. I came across a Bill Haley record today that was on a strange label. Usually Bill Haley, you think of Decca, but this was not. It was like, I don't even know what it was. It was. I almost picked it up. It was at a thrift store. Jody says if the grid was to go down in the U.S., that wouldn't require electricity to produce physical media photos because these photos can be developed without any electricity, unlike taking pictures on your phone. That's true. Gary says one of the problems with digital is it's always sounding exactly the same. Every time you play it, analog will never sound exactly the same because it's not locked. And that's a really good observation. Gary, would it be true to say that every time you play it, it would sound progressively worse? Because I know as you play a record, you're grinding it away. I mean, having physical contact there, it's going to wear down. Eventually, the noise is going to overtake the sound and fade away. But before that happens, I wonder if it's just a gradual thing or what. I would think so. But that's a really interesting observation. And you're right, digital will sound the same, which some people would say that's a benefit. I can listen to my favorite song a million times and never wear out the media. Old radios, I got recordings on 15, 16 on reel to reel. That speed was only on some Wollensack recorders. Huh. 2-track stereo is nice sounding, but no reverse in the tapes exactly. Yeah, it's interesting, the backing materials for tapes. So yeah, and that's interesting. That was part of the selling thing, especially with the blanks. So like sometimes they would even say it on the commercial releases. Like this one is acetate, which was one of the first materials they used for backing. And there was polyester and other materials. Yeah, acetate. I just saw that right after I showed that. Exactly. Yeah, artists are doing it on cassette tapes, and I think that the thing about cassettes is you can just record them yourself, whereas a record or a digital, like my wife's song that was released recently. By the way, check it out if you haven't. Always Rain, Pure Imagination, available right now on Apple in lossless. It's available on Spotify, on YouTube, everywhere that books are sold. But seriously, any streaming service you can check out. Always Rain, Pure Imagination, her new song. And what I was going to say is that you don't just upload a song to Apple Music. You have to go through a complete intermediary. It takes weeks. There's contracts, there's percentages, and it's a distribution platform. And it takes time and it takes money. So the thing about it is if you're a band and you just want to release your music, you can simply record it to a tape and hand them out or sell them. Same thing with CDs. And even records, if you have a press, can get it pressed. I'm super proud of her. It's a beautiful song. That's great. She did a great job. Let's see here. I got this Sony quad deck. I need quad tape someday and a quad decoder. Yeah, that'd be cool. Can I do a review on the GPO Piccadilly? GPO made that Brooklyn boombox, didn't they? I think I saw one of those in person once, but oh, interesting. GPO. I'm looking at it right now. I love it when you guys tell me about a product and then go look it up. GPO, retro, Piccadilly, modern turntable, Bluetooth, speakers white. Is this that same brand that made that thing I'm thinking of? Their picture looks like it's about half a megapixel, and it's a complete fisheye distortion too. Very strange. $50. If I can get my hands on one, yeah. Right now, insider knowledge, I'm trying to get my hands on I'm on a wait list to get my hands on the IKEA turntable. You guys have mentioned it. Some of my counterparts supposedly have one. They're hard to get. It looks very cool. But yeah, like this, I would love to get my hands on that tool. Is that in stores? Like, I feel like I'm on a fake Walmart website right now. That's weird. No, it's real. That's interesting. Yeah, thanks for the tip. I'll have to check that out. KJ, Chicago 1. Hello from Chicago. Think vinyl might make a comeback? Yeah, I think they might. I think vinyl might make a comeback, man. I think so. Sold more last year than even the year before. Not having 78 speed turns me off getting certain turntables. I wish it would have it. And I get it. Most people that are into vinyl aren't going to be caring about a 78. But yeah. Remember Convertiquad blank recording 8-track tapes? Yep. Absolutely. Quadraphonic was the thing. Yep. It was the precursor to quads to surround sound. 4-track, essentially a 4-track surround. And the fact they can encode quad into a record still blows my mind. I've got some quad discs. In fact, you can play, they're backwards compatible, so you can play a quad disc on a non-quad record player or a record player without the quad decoder, and it sounds fine. Actually, it sounds better than stereo. I've got that Enoch Light Total Sound Shock record that I overuse as a test record because it's copyright friendly. And I've got the quad version and I've got the stereo version, and the quad version sounds better, even without any decoding. Marcus says, I recently got the Glenn Miller book with original 78s you showed, was overjoyed. That's awesome. That is so cool. And thank you guys for the gifts recently. We just so humbled and blown away by that. Oh, West Tech Services. Yes. They do it. It might have been Bill Haley's country stuff. And yeah, he was a country artist before he switched over to rock. He was way ahead of Taylor Swift on that. Because that has a more DIY feel. It does. And reel-to-reel even more so. You deal with reel-to-reel for a couple of days, and you're threading the tape, and you have to make adjustments and things. And then you go play with a cassette, and you're like, man, this is handy. This is genius. Putting tape inside a cassette shell. This is genius. You get the sound of analog tape without having to fiddle with it. Wire recorders. Yeah, I haven't got into wire recorders. People have tried to get me into it. I just haven't gone down that hole yet. I think it hurts my brain to try to figure out how a wire can hold an audio signal. Anthony says Audiophile said that MoFi, Mobile Fidelity records, are superior sounding records with 3 different layers named the Ultra Disc, with lower quantities of batches being remastered from the original tapes. Yeah, I would love to hear some of that. I haven't had the chance to yet. Old Radio says, especially rewinding those spools, I'm scared it's going to snap and tangle. Yeah, true. MoFi records usually $100 each. Yeah, I think I have heard this. Saw a review of one of those IKEA turntables. Don't tell me anything about it. Don't tell me anything about it. I've been trying to resist the temptation to watch a review on it myself. They look cool. Yeah, I didn't know they sold one either. And all of a sudden, they're sold out everywhere. They're selling like hotcakes. I think I want to tear it down too, because I want to see who makes that thing. And by the way, some of you guys asked why we didn't do the teardown on yesterday's record player. All will be revealed soon. That record player is going to play prominently on the show in the next few weeks in ways that you may not expect. Jody says there's a whole convoluted history of why video cassette tapes aren't produced today, but the gist of it is that they were never supposed to have gone out of production. Interesting. I'll have to check that out. Groovy Lisa, welcome in. Sound Lab Studios, welcome in. I got some of those CX decoded. Oh, I need to check those out. Those would be cool to check out. George says, what would you say is your favorite record you own? Oh, man. I can't just pick one, and it changes from day to day. You know what I mean? There's so many. I can't. Let's just say this. What sections of my collection have so many of a certain type that they're named after the artist? In other words, not just country or rap or classical, but are so many of a particular artist. I have a section: Peggy Lee, Patsy Cline, Elvis, Glenn Miller, Jackie Gleason. I got a lot of Jackie Gleason records. I think that's it. So those are some of my absolute favorites. And then within that, there are favorites. Anthony says, what are your favorite 80s and 70s bands, and what era do you like the most? Great question, Anthony. So if I haven't told you yet, I am one of the few YouTubers, vinyl record people that isn't all about rock and metal. I actually prefer the artists I was just talking about. And but I listen to all types of music. I do have a small rock collection. For 80s and 70s bands, if we're talking like rock bands, my friend Adrian got me into, one of my friends in the UK, got me into Status Quo. So I've got some Status Quo. I've learned to really appreciate that music. I like that. 80s stuff, I'm a child of the 80s, so everything from George Michael to Michael Jackson to not Prince. I'm not a Prince fan. I've tried. Local radio still plays Raspberry Beret and 1999 on rotation. It's screaming at the end of it. I just can't. But yeah, I like so much music. I keep looking like it's gonna. What kind of music are you? I just like so much different music. It's hard to say. How many sound effects records do you own? I have maybe 3 or 4 sound effects. Yeah, I'd say maybe 3. Dexter64, welcome in. Anthony, what is your clearest sounding phono cartridge under $200? Clearest. I'm translating that to mean not warm sounding, but clear, clean, crisp, neutral. So Audio Technica. You know what? People, they underrate the clarity and the quality of the good old 3600L cartridge. Yeah, it's a $12 cartridge, but it's phenomenal. Carbon fiber cantilever. I don't know if this is single magnet or dual magnet. Actually, this is a moving iron. No, this is a moving magnet cartridge. It's phenomenal. But the other one we were looking at earlier, the VM95E, I'm going to look it up because I want to make sure that I'm saying it right. Is just such a $35 cartridge. You don't need to spend $200 to get a really good sounding cartridge. 1895E. Okay. Nope. That's a higher end one, I think. Isn't it? No, yeah. 1895E. So that one I was showing you, the green tipped one, it tracks between 1.5 and 2.5 grams. 2 grams recommended, which is what mine's at. It's got an alloy tube cantilever, 1/2-inch mount, and an elliptical stylus. If you're not familiar with the difference between elliptical and conical, then that's a topic for another day, but that's something else to look into. If you want an elliptical cartridge that rides a little deeper in the groove, your records have to be cleaner, or else they start sounding more staticky. All right, you guys. I have a Mendelssohn Scotch Symphony on vinyl, 1971, conducted by Herbert von Karajan. Wow, that's awesome. 2 years and still not replaced 78 RPM needle on my Audio Technica cartridge. That's amazing. I really wish I had broke my Ortofon 7.8 Space Age Pop. Alfonso, hello from Denver. I would like to know. By the way, I'm in Denver too, so hello. It's cold out there, isn't it? I would like to know if it is safe to store your records in the storage unit. We are currently in the process of moving. I would also like to see your model trains. Interesting. I don't have that many model trains. I've got one N gauge setup that's in a shoebox right now because I don't. This is supposed to be the layout board for it, and as you can see, it's not put together at the moment. I have been working on some 3D printing projects. In fact, as we speak right now, I'm running a 6-hour 3D print on some stands for my Game Boy and a couple different video game handhelds. But I had been playing around with 3D printing little buildings for the train layout, so that's fun. But yeah, here in Denver, would I store records in storage? I've done it before. When I've moved, I've put them in storage, and it is what it is. You know what I mean? It's the humidity changes, the temperature, as you know, right now it's freezing outside. It was snowing today here in Denver, if you guys can believe it. It was snowing here today. We got our first snow. But it's probably not. I mean, ideally, you'd want it in a temperature controlled environment. Is anything going to bust or just fall apart because you put it in storage in room temperature, or assuming you're talking about non-heated, non-climate controlled storage like I did? I would just be careful to bring your records and equipment back to room temperature before you operate it, especially the electronics. Like you wouldn't want to take a record player or anything with a bulb like a film projector, which I did last winter, and pull it straight from the cold and start to play it because you'll break bulbs. Condensation can build up with a temperature change. Just let things acclimate back to room temperature. If you're talking about climate controlled storage, then you got no problem whatsoever. But if you're not, then you just give it time to get back up to temperature. That would be my recommendation. And with the records, would probably be more prone to breakage, especially 78s and things like that, because of the colder temperatures. So just give them time to come back up to temperature and be careful, and it should be fine. Arthur Lyman says old radios. Yes, I've got an Arthur Lyman tape and a record or two. Nelson Riddle, it's good stuff. The frugal audiophile. I'm like you. I have a lot of pop and country in my collection. I'm not really drawn to classic rock or metal as much. I do have some of it. Yeah, exactly. Riddle, Enoch Light, Les Baxter, all those are good stuff. Did I miss somebody? Did I miss somebody named Ruth? Or is that the name of a band? If I missed you and I didn't say hi, hi. Anthony says, do you like hip hop and what are your favorite artists? I do, Anthony, actually a lot. My son and I are really big into Christian hip hop, especially. So Lecrae, Andy Mineo, NF, Tripoli. There's so many good ones. Secular hip hop. I've got some Beastie Boys. At one point or another, I listened to pretty much a lot of what was available, especially in the 90s, like Run DMC, stuff like that. I go through these phases. It's a genre that I've spent a lot of time listening to. And still, there'll be days, especially if I'm like at the gym or hiking or something, and I want something upbeat with a beat. Some of the new artists are really cool too, like Wanda, Christian hip hop artists, fantastic. Some really, really good music coming out. Holvey is another good artist. So yeah, absolutely. Julie London, yes. So I took your advice on that, and I checked out some Julie London music, and it is good. It really, really is. It's $13 at Walmart. Oh, really? I never seen Walmart reduce their vinyl prices down that low. The last Walmart record I bought was a Peggy Lee thing on clear purple vinyl. I'm drawn to space age pop and 1895 to 1935 era records. That's awesome. I'm sucking for some obscure psych, garage rock, and disco records. Dude, that's cool. Interesting eclectic music tastes. It's a sign of intelligence, I was taught, to appreciate multiple forms of music. Ray Conniff had a Columbia Records stereo quadraphonic LP from 1973 called The World of Quadraphonic Sound. Oh, interesting. I never knew that Ray Conniff did that. That's a really interesting thing. Jody says albums were produced on 8-track tapes until the late 80s. That's right. Anthony says, thanks for responding. Do you know the difference between nude and unnude cartridge styli, including the difference between diamond and elliptical? So let's start with nude, and actually the opposite of nude is called bonded. So basically, if you were to take, hold on a second. Okay, let's put that over there. So let's say that this is the stylus, or this is the needle itself. I'm oversimplifying it. We're going to represent it as a triangle. A nude stylus, the entire stylus material is diamond. Everything. The whole thing is a solid piece of diamond. Even though the only part that touches the record may be this part, the entire stylus is diamond. However, a bonded stylus has just a little piece of diamond at the tip. Only the part that touches the record is diamond, or ruby, or whatever the material is, but more commonly diamond. And the rest of it is steel or some other kind of metal. So it's bonded to a steel, and then a nude, the entire thing is diamond. People say they can hear a big difference, and you'll pay more. Obviously, more diamond is more expensive than less diamond. So like the Ortophon 2M red and the Ortophon 2M blue are actually they're identical cartridges. It's just that the red has a bonded stylus and the blue has a nude stylus. So nude, the entire thing is diamond. Bonded means only the tip. And the other thing you asked was diamond and elliptical. So diamond is a material. It's the hardest substance on Earth, obviously. So a diamond stylus is going to last longer. But elliptical is actually a shape. So there are different shapes of styli. And the most common is, if you were to zoom in, okay, so remember this drawing? This is the oversimplified drawing of a stylus. The next thing I'm going to draw is the very, very tip of this, the very bottom. So these are minute things. The most common is called a conical stylus. So the bottom of it is rounded. And if you were to put that rounded tip in a record groove, which I'm representing as the V here, you'll see that it makes contact here and it makes contact there. But it doesn't go all the way down into the bottom of the groove, which, by the way, is where a lot of dirt and grime and gunk live down in here. So it's more common for cheaper entry-level record players to have a conical stylus, which is fine. But if you have an elliptical stylus, it's going to look like this. It's less rounded at the bottom. It goes further down in the into the groove. So whereas that is rounded, doesn't go very far down, elliptical goes further down, so it reads more information. Now, one of the good things is if you buy old, worn-out records, the wear is going to be right here on the sides of the groove where it's making the most contact. So one trick is if you get an old, worn-out record, it was most likely worn out with a conical stylus. So the wear is in a certain spot in the groove, but down here, untouched. Probably dirty, needs a good cleaning, but untouched. So you put an elliptical stylus, and it's not even, dealing with these areas that are worn out anymore. It's making contact down in here. So you can get good sound using elliptical stylus on a worn out record that was worn out with that. So that's the other half of things. So, and there's other types too. There's like Shibata, but the two main types are elliptical, which have to track lighter. They track usually 1 gram or 1.5 grams versus the conical. You're really getting into the subjective point. If you were to listen back and forth between a conical and elliptical, you'd be like, okay, yeah, it is a little clear. I do hear a little difference, but it's not going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been listening to records the wrong way my whole life. Isaac says, hello, just got a new turntable not too long ago. Realized today that the cantilever looks slightly bent. I'm wondering if this is damaged record. No, this is pretty common actually, because entry-level record players don't have an anti-skate control. And the anti-skate control is what keeps the stylus from pulling inward. The tone arm has a tendency to want to pull inward. And so it counteracts that by adding a little bit of force so that the tone arm is neutral and its position is dictated by the grooves. So if you don't have that, there's this force pulling the tone arm in, and that force is making contact with the stylus, which has a tendency to bend inward. But it's not going to damage anything, and it's just kind of a byproduct of entry-level stuff. Wax and celluloid cylinders do not like the cold odor. That's right, exactly. You don't want, because the wax is like, that's not a, you know what I mean? It's wax. It's not good. Ruth Welcome is a zither player. Okay. Shows you what I know. All right, guys, let's wrap it up here. We got an hour. It's only going to go 30 minutes, but the conversation has been good, so thank you for that. So let me finish out here. And then I'll give you the news. I will not forget to give you the news. Are 8-track tapes lower quality than cassettes, and do cassette decks need preamps? Okay, preamps or cassette decks do not need preamps because a cassette deck will output a line level signal by its design. 8 tracks, lower quality. I would say as a whole, usually, because the 8-track tapes are worn out at this point. Also to keep in mind, 8-track tape, even though it uses 1/4-inch tape versus the 1/8-inch tape of a cassette, it's still got the same real estate for each track because it's fitting 8 tracks on a 1/4-inch tape versus 4 tracks on an 1/8-inch tape. Does that make sense? 8 tracks are crammed into a 1/4-inch tape, and 4 tracks are crammed into an 1/8-inch tape on a cassette. So the real estate per track is the same. The speed is higher on an 8-track, 3 3/4 inches per second, but unless you have pristine tapes and equipment that was maintained and was indoor equipment, not car equipment, tapes weren't left in the sun, you're almost always better to get sound out of compact cassette tapes than 8-tracks. Alfonso says the No 78s are guaranteed to get damaged when they're during transfer as a way to protect them. Gosh, just what you would think, man. Keep them in sleeves. If you can put some like foam in between each one. I don't look forward to doing that. That's not to moving shellac records. Not great. Jody says you should check out James' last nonstop dancing albums from the 80s. I'll do that. Naked Styli. Do you have any movie soundtrack records? Yeah, I've got a movie soundtrack section. I should do a show on that someday. Do you think the quality of the music has declined? Boy, that's subjective. Quality of music. Me personally, there are a handful of modern artists I like, but I'm an old soul, so I love the old stuff better. That's just me personally. Do you like the Ortofon Red over the Grado Black? Ortofon Red, I've had one of those, and it was fine. It was a good cartridge, but I like the warmth of the Grado Black better, and it costs less, I believe. No, that's not true. The Red is about 100. Grado's 100. Sumiko Black Pearl, a little cheaper than the Black, also sounds the same. I would go Grado over Ortofon any day because I like warm tonality. Old Radio says some of my 78s were worn out because someone used a steel needle more than one play. Yep. Pido Vor says, I have a proposition for you, brother. Put me in touch with your counterpart who recently repaired the record lathe. In return, I will grind your wife's songs onto a 45 when it's up and running. Hey, that's a really nice idea. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Look up Fardemark, Fardemark on YouTube, Fardemark, Fardemark. And yeah, he didn't repair it himself. he got it repaired. But if you contact him, he would be able to tell you who that was. And I would appreciate having the record cut on 45. That's awesome. And collecting vintage 8-track tape CD is also a good hobby too these days. It's all digital. Yeah, it's fun, to have the option to interact with your media is always fun. Your 8-track splice video opened me up in terms of interest in it. It is fun. It is a pain. It's a really annoying format. You just pull the tape out front, splice the tape on the bottom. Yeah, exactly. Instead of cutting it, I'm like, wait a minute, we're making this way too difficult. Record lathe getting a cutting edge rebuilt after the Bolex. Priorities, right? All right, my friends, this has been an awesome interaction tonight. I appreciate each and every one of you. Another lathe troll 70. Hey, I appreciate it. Welcome in. So here is the insider news, my friends. To those of you reaching the end of the replay, or those of you that are here in person tonight, which is the best of the best, we are doing a giveaway show. Multiple giveaways, and we're doing it coming up very soon. So the insider tip is this: be on the lookout for notifications on details. And I'm not sure how we're going to choose winners, but we are going to do a global giveaway. Everybody is eligible, regardless of where you're at. It's probably going to cost me a ton, but we're going to do it anyway. So stay tuned. It will be coming up sooner than later, and it'll be either up, notified there'll either be a post about it, or maybe in a video we'll talk about it. So don't miss our videos over the next few days, posts, all that stuff. Check out the community tab, because we are doing giveaways. We've got stuff lined up. See all those records right there? Those are giveaway records. Those are waiting for a new owner. So we might give away some records. We've got some equipment to give away. We've got accessories, all that kind of stuff. Yes, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for tonight. So happy record hunting. God bless each and every one of you, and we will see you next time.